Let's start with the outcome of the Bush administration. I think it's clear that no matter whether it's McCain or Obama who becomes president, US-Syria relations will improve. There are several specific aspects of Bush's presidency that were harmful to US-Syrian relations. First is the influence of Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney was chosen by Bush for his past experience in foreign policy. He served in the cabinet of George H.W. Bush, the father, who, by the way, had good relations with Syria, with Hafez al-Assad, and had James Baker as his Secretary of State and sponsored the Madrid Peace Accords. So, again, I don't think it's entirely fair to say Democrats are better for U.S.-Syrian relations than Republicans, because there have been effective Republican administrations, going back to Richard Nixon. Now, Cheney really implemented almost his own foreign policy. He appointed his daughter, Liz Cheney, who was a low-level attorney, to be Deputy Secretary of State for Near East Affairs. So essentially, he put his daughter as a spy in the State Department. I recognize the irony of coming to the Middle East and criticizing my own country for putting a family member in a prominent position, but nonetheless, this type of activity is unlikely to continue whether McCain or Obama becomes the next president. Second are the strong links between the Saud family and the Bush family, which go back for many, many years. That's gone. That's finished. So those ideological factors will be diminished. And I think that clearer heads will prevail. Again, either Republican or Democrat, the president needs to recognize, almost from a selfish perspective, achieving peace between Syria and Israel. And to touch upon your question, yes, they are definitely interconnected, because at some point America will have to step in a leadership role. And so I think for Syria, without having any major resources that make it an attractive and essential ally to the United States, it's politically interconnected with the Israeli file. So yes, peace with Israel means good relations with the United States. It's hard to imagine that you can separate the two. So I think in this case, you have to rely upon almost the ego of the next president to say, I want to be the one to create peace between Israel and Syria. I want the picture forever enshrined in history that I was the one who brought this struggle since 1948 to a close after more than 60 years. And I think even under the McCain administration, though McCain has many advisors from the neocons, I still think there's enough common sense amongst himself and his staff that they would recognize this is an important and fruitful activity to undertake. So clearly there's divisions within Israeli society. I don't think that the Arabs in general have done enough to understand that, and therefore that has hampered their ability to negotiate effectively. Arab countries like Syria should be doing polling. They should be doing polling in Israel. They should be sponsoring polling of the Israeli public to understand what are the attitudes. You'll often hear Israelis say things like, our border with Syria is more secure than our border with Egypt. And yet we have a peace treaty with Egypt, and technically we're still at war with Syria. Many Israelis will say this, but some will say it for one reason, others will say it for another. Some will say, this proves that Syria is a reliable negotiating partner, and that's why we should make peace, because they've lived by, even in quote-unquote a state of war, they've lived by their agreements. Other Israelis will say, well, we get everything we want, they can't hurt us, so they're so weak, we don't need to engage them in peace negotiations. Those are two very, very different attitudes that lead to the same conclusion, or the same statement, or observation. And therefore, I think if you want to effectively negotiate with them, it's incumbent upon you to understand what's driving those two attitudes, and understand what percentage of the population holds one attitude or the other, and is it possible to communicate more effectively so that you can change the perception. So there's a lot of work that can be done in public relations. What's my opinion as an Arab American with respect to political and economic reforms in Syria and in the Middle East? Again, I'm not a neoconservative, and I reject the neoconservative view that we have to project the American society on the rest of the world. Arab society is Arab society. It's not necessarily a culture of democracy. It's a culture of shiyukh and, Zaim and things like that. What?
Shura.
Shura. No, shul, like sheikh, you know.
Shura, like Arab democracy, okay.
You know. Yes, can democracy be adapted? Absolutely, but as I said, when Bush was campaigning in 2000 for president, I was very pleased to hear him say, we don't need to tell other countries how to become democratic. They need to find their own way. So just coming in and saying, okay, Palestinians, you have to hold elections right now. Anybody can hold an election. It doesn't mean that you've established the conditions that really create a healthy democracy. It's not my role as an American to come here, or any other American to come here and tell you how to reform. Yes, is there corruption? Absolutely. Is there a need for economic reform?
It's bad for the United States. You know? Democracy here is very bad for the United States.
With the, under the current...
Because Hamas will win every day.
Well, under the current circumstances, when you don't have an effective civil society, you don't have a healthy economy, this enables extremist elements to rally their base and to win elections. But the idea that if we should spread democracy around the world, because if people are free to vote, then they'll be like us. Well, they may be free to vote for someone that will pursue a policy completely contrary to your policy. So I agree, it's unwise for America to just insist upon elections for the sake of having elections, so they can say we spread democracy to the Middle East.
Yeah,
it's
but
a very unwise policy.
It is not a stereotype, because we don't believe that America, you know, have democracy in, you know, in itself. The discrimination and everything. So it's not as American stereotypes to say that this country is democratic, this is not democratic. They're not the referee or the judge in the world. To say, you know, like Hamas, election, but they don't recognize that. They don't want it to be. They don't consider it as a democratic, you know, election. But they don't care whether, you know, they accept it or not.
I agree, but and I'm not here to say that America is flawless. But yes, there are free and fair elections in the United States. And there are issues of discrimination, civil rights violations of on the basis of race or religion or ethnicity, but these are a minority of incidents.
Do you consider the first Bush election in 2000 fair election?
Yes, I do.
Free and fair election?
Yes, I do. I think it's completely unproductive, given where we are right now in the world, to go back and bring up the topic again that did Bush win the election and did he steal the election? No, he won the election. He won the election. Were there flaws in Florida? Absolutely. Were there flaws in other places? Is it perfect? No. I'm not here to say it's perfect. But let's not cloud the issue. We have enough problems to deal with right now than to go back and say Bush was never rightfully the president.
Fair and free election. When you say that America has a fair and free election and the other Romulus has took place, then people may ask themselves, even that happened in America, what else?
Was it a perfect election? No. Was it free and fair? Yes. Yes. And if Gore had won, I would have said the same thing. It's very clear if you watch the videos of McCain's campaign rallies that there's some very, very angry people there. They're angry at Obama personally. They're angry about what looks like Republicans headed for defeat. And the remark about the woman said, "I've read about him. You can't trust him. He's an Arab." And then McCain took the microphone and cut her off. There was an email being circulated, and I think many people that saw McCain's comment, they haven't seen the email from which this woman's comments were derived. Basically, it was an email saying, you can't trust Obama. And it went to describe, it was really a ridiculous email. It went to describe to 2 decimal places Obama's blood origin. He's 64.25% something, and it was really absurd. He's this much African Arab, and this much Arab, and this much black African. And with some other very, very bizarre statements. And so I think when McCain, to his credit, okay, I don't think he handled the situation perfectly, but to his credit, I think when he saw this woman heading down that path, in his mind he calculated, this is a woman who read this thing and actually think that it's true. She's obviously not a sophisticated political observer. And I think he wanted to steer the discussion away from that topic, because if a rally becomes a discussion of this email, that's a disaster. He wants to be talking about his issues, his tax policy, his healthcare policy. And so what he was basically saying is, anyone who read that email, I don't agree with that email, Obama's a decent man, and let's talk about the issues.